All right, so I wanted to take a moment to welcome everybody today and thank you for joining us to learn a little bit about research and especially with a focus on nutritional and biomedical research. And today I've got my good friend Diana Gutierrez with us today from UT Austin. She is working on her doctorate in nutrition with a focus on the gut microbiome. And I'm going to be your moderator today. My name is Josh Mitchell, and I've seen some of you on here over the course of our last few sessions that we've had with other healthcare professionals. And I work for Education Service Center Region 13. So if you're in a high school in the area, Region 13 works with a whole host of other of school districts in a pretty wide area. And then as part of this series, we've been working closely with Ascension Seton to partner up with many of the speakers that you've been able to talk to throughout our journey over the past month. Before we get started, we've got a quick agenda just to kind of run you through what we're going to do over the next 30 minutes to an hour. We're going to do a quick roll call and introductions here in a minute, and I'll go through the protocols for that. And then I'm going to be asking Diana some questions about her career and education. And then you'll have an opportunity to pose some questions as well. And then finally, we'll finish off with thank yous and say goodbye for the day. Before we get started, love to kind of hear just a little bit about where you are from. Like I said, I've seen some of you on here, but our guest speaker doesn't know all of you. And if you wouldn't mind, go into your chat box and just telling us your name. And then if you're with an employer, let us know who your employer is. Or if you're with a student at a school district, tell us what school you work at. As you put your stuff into the chat box, I'm going to go ahead and start with introductions, but as you are putting that information in, we'll have an opportunity to just see where you're from. So thanks for including that in there, and please keep letting us know where you are from. We really appreciate it. Before we get started here, I'd like to go through just a few Zoom expectations for our meetings. And the first thing is we are live recording this, so I do have it recorded, and I'm going to share this with Workforce Solutions, which is the organization that helps partner people with jobs in our local area. And they're going to ultimately post this on their YouTube page for others to view at a later time. So if you don't want to be caught on camera, please just make sure that you do turn off your video and you can just stay muted. But I'll have the chat box open so that you are able to just take a look and ask any questions that you might have toward the end of our sessions today. As we go through today, I make sure that everybody does remain on mute, but if you do find yourself off mute and we start to get a little bit of background noise, I ask that you all just go ahead and take a moment to just mute yourself because we can pick up all that different background noise that happens and it can make things a little distracting, but I'm also able to take a look at that as well. If you have a question, one of the things I'm asking is just include those questions in the chat box, and I'm going to continue to be your moderator for today's session. And as we go through, I will make sure that I do go back to the chat box and I ask Diana about your question that you have about research. And then, of course, at the end, we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for you to pose any questions that you might have about being a researcher and or Diana's educational experience, as we talk about in just a moment, in Mexico and then the United States. So with that being said, let me introduce my friend Diana, and I'm going to go through these questions in just a little bit. But Diana is a good friend of mine. We actually have two kiddos that are about the same age apart. They're just about a week apart from each other in age, which has been kind of fun to watch them grow up. And she is my neighbor. She lives around the corner, not too far from here. And she is originally from Chiapas, Mexico, which is pretty cool. And she attended university in Mexico in Monterrey, and then came to the United States, worked for a little while, and then began her PhD here as a researcher. And her focus has been on nutrition, but she's also worked in the biomedical research field as well. So it's such a cool story. And I think as some of you start to consider your educational journey, I hope you consider going elsewhere to go to university or do maybe a semester abroad and have that opportunity to learn from a different culture. So I think she has some great insights that she can share about that. And then on top of that, she's a brilliant woman who is pursuing an amazing educational path that can help lots of people. our focus right now with the research is on the gut and the microbiome and the bacteria in the gut that help us maintain our health. There's a lot of bacteria that help us stay healthy and keep us productive. And in addition to that, one of the things to think about with research is this is one area that you may want to consider for your career, because it is one of those areas where there is an army of people that we sometimes never hear about who are creating the next great ideas that are going to help us stay healthy, or that next medication that's going to help cure a disease, or maybe it's the next vaccination that could potentially get us over this COVID virus. So I really encourage a lot of you to consider the possibility of a research career, because it is a very noble one, and it is a way for you to benefit thousands, millions, and even billions of people, depending on what you do. So thank you again for being here, Deanna. And I'm going to kick this off with our first question. Really, it's more of a prompt, but we'd love to hear about your educational journey. So you've had an opportunity to have schooling in Mexico and then the United States. And tell us a little bit about that experience and what that's been like for you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. Josh already gave a very, very good introduction to who I am. And so in terms of my educational and work journey, it was an odd one. I actually graduated in the recession in Mexico during the 2008 recession. So I have some experience with recessions. And I had done an internship in my last summer in college, and for one or another reason, I got contacted by my boss during the summer internship, and I came to Houston. I came originally to Houston, and I got offered a job, and it was the recession. So even though I didn't have plans to come to the United States, I think that people here in America often think that everybody wants to come to America. And I think America is a great country, and I love it because I'm here. But I never really had that ambition to come to the US. And I found myself in that position because of the conditions around me. So I'm originally from Chiapas, Mexico, and my home state is one with the least level of education and job opportunities in Mexico. So I had to go outside of my home state to get my college degree, and then I came back after I graduated and could not find a job for almost, I would say, 6 to 8 months, maybe. So so it was a hard situation, and I took the opportunity that came to me. And so I was lucky to be born in a family. So a little bit more about my background. I come from a farming family. My family's original hometown is in the state of Oaxaca in Mexico, and my grandparents were mango growers, like the fruits that you guys buy at the HEB. And my mom and her sisters were the first generation in her family to get a degree, a college degree. But my grandfather was, I think he was a visionary. He only attended, I think, up until 3rd grade. And my grandmother was illiterate, which I did not realize until I was in college. I never realized that my grandmother did not know how to read until I had enough consciousness to be like, oh, this is actually something. But so my grandfather actually encouraged everybody in my grandmother's family. My grandfather was born out of wedlock. That's how. So he did not have a father, and he had very good influences in his life. And that's something that I want to, a point that I want to drive. Sometimes the best influences that we have are not directly our family of origin. Sometimes we can take advantage of people who reach a hand to us. And my grandfather was the best example for that. He became tailor and many, many other traits. But he had the vision that all his family would have an education, and that trickled down all the way to me. And in part, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to pursue graduate education, because I wanted to do it to honor my grandfather. He was one of the biggest influences in my life, and to me and to his whole extended family. And he was the one that inspired me to try and do it, because why not? So I went to college in Monterrey. I graduated. My undergraduate degree is in biotechnology engineering, and I graduated. I did not find a job, and then somehow an opportunity in Houston came knocking on the door. It was a research job, and so I was a research assistant. For the first 3 years, I was in the US, and I was basically a support person for everybody in the lab. And it was never my intention to do a PhD, to grow a career in biomedical research, but I got into it. I mean, I knew I liked biology, and I started working on it. And it actually was very interesting. So one of the things that I always knew about myself is that I am very curious. I used to tinker with my toys and break things apart, and I figured things out, how they worked. And so it really fed this job really fed that part of me. And I was never bored. It was a physical type of work. I was standing all the time. It was hard. And when it was in the middle of it, I remember telling myself, if you can do this, you can do anything you decide to do. So I decided to take on the challenge and try. And I ended up going to another position as a research assistant after it. But it was one of the best experiences I had. So I think one of the things that I can share with you guys is that sometimes things that look bad, like graduating in a recession, or getting a job that you were not really interested in, can be the best things. Can really define where your life goes. And now I'm here living in the States after, I think, 10 years. I think next year is my 10-year anniversary. I got married. I had a kid here. I met my husband. So I started graduate school, and that was all because I took a chance on something that I wasn't 100% sure about, but I tried. And it ended up being great. So I hope that answers the question.
That did. That did. Thank you for. I might be getting a little bit of feedback there. But that is a great answer, and I love how you share just your experiences and how your grandfather played a huge role in your education going forward. And I think that's absolutely amazing. And I had a very similar experience in a recession in that I was also laid off about the same time you were kind of graduating and getting into things. So that was the reason I turned to education and became a teacher, as it was something I was always interested in. So as you mentioned, you just never know what may happen and where life's path may take you. So thank you for sharing that experience. Thinking back along, just to before all of your university experience, what advice would you give to high school students who are interested in joining some sort of research field?
I think that, what would I have told myself back then? I think I would have told myself, you don't know if you like it. Like, you don't know. So back then I never thought about it. Like, I know almost all of you are high school students, so I did not know I was going to go into research. I was a dancer, I was a ballerina, and I loved arts. And I did engineering because in Mexico you don't necessarily go to college for something that you are passionate about. You go to college for something that is going to get you a job. That's how things are in Mexico. And so I went there because I was good in math, and engineering topics came easy to me. And my sister was an engineer, so I had to be an engineer because I'm very competitive with her specifically. She's my older sister, so I had to like keep up. And so I would tell myself, just try, ask questions, talk to somebody that does it, and go and see if you can find an opportunity to get, even just visit a lab one day, because it's a very different field of work, that it's not so accessible to people to see. And I didn't know what it was to work in research. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know what the day-to-day was, or who you got to work with, or what topics you got to work on. I thought about scientists like people that just don't talk to anybody and are like, and I'm Hispanic. I don't do that, right? I'm just so talkative and outgoing. And I feel like people with my background, or similar backgrounds, are a little intimidated by that environment, right? Like, am I going to be in a corner, like hiding and not talk to anybody? And that's not how it is. So just be curious, go and ask people. And if you think that, I think the thing that I love the most about this career is that I never get bored, which has its downsides and its upsides. But I never think about like, oh, I have to go to work again. Like, I get to answer questions and be curious and like go outside of the box, and just like unleash whatever curiosity you have for anything. So that I would say, just let that, we all have that. We all have, and I see it in our kids a lot, right? Like, they're just tinkering with things all the time. And just let that go. Sometimes our environment tells us like, oh, don't do that. Don't go out of what you're supposed to be doing, right? What your family expects of you. Don't. Just follow your gut and follow your intuition, and be curious. And asking questions never killed anyone. So, well, it never killed anyone in a small sense, but it's a good thing. Asking questions is a good thing. But I think that is the biggest advice I would give them.
I think that's great advice. I love how you share. You shared that getting out there and experiencing a lab and seeing what it's like, that is so crucial. And I think we've heard that from all of our speakers so far. For those of you who are joining us today, that it is important to get out there and check that out. And it is also important to be curious. And I think that's a great part of being a researcher, is you do get to be curious and be a creative problem solver if you do enjoy doing that. Deanna, you had mentioned that one part was you were destined to get this education. Your sister was pursuing engineering. You are interested in kind of solving and being creative and questioning things. Was there anything else that kind of resonated for you that made you decide that being a researcher was going to be your pathway in your career? Anything else that you can think of?
Yeah, I think that I've always been attracted to things that are hard for me. I think that was one, and that is a very personal thing, right? Not everybody is comfortable with not knowing, and I have been since very young very pushed to improving myself somehow, improving in some way. When I was a dancer, I wanted to be the best dancer I could possibly be, not better than somebody else, but the best one I could be. And so through undergrad, I actually started my undergraduate degree as a chemical engineer, because that's one of the highest, one of the career paths that is hired the most in Mexico. And so I basically would have come out and got a job immediately. But I remember I went to my first organic chemistry class, and I sat there for, I think, the first session, and I decided this is not for me. I just felt like I was dying inside. And I decided to change my track to something else, to biotechnology engineering. And I think that's another key thing, knowing what you don't want, what you don't like, what you are not going to be happy doing is important. But the only thing that is going to lead you to that is experiencing something. And often we think of that as failures, and that is hard to people are scared of people in general, including myself. We're scared of failing, right? But failures are just learning opportunities. So you go try something, you don't like it, rewind again and check where you are supposed to go. So I think that was knowing what I didn't want to do was something that really led me to what I wanted to do. I don't know if it's a weird way of answering the question, but really taking a chance of the unknown and knowing, having tried something, knowing what is not for you. And knowing that even though, I mean, I should have been a chemical engineer, right? Biotechnology back then, we're talking about 2008, wasn't even a word in the Spanish dictionary. So I was gonna come out, and I actually did come out and encounter recruiters asking me like, what is biotechnology? Nobody really knew. And it was a big risk for me to go from a career path that was safe and was gonna get me a job to something that wasn't, right? But I followed my gut because I knew that that was not going to be what I would enjoy. So knowing what not to do and taking a risk, those are the two things.
I love that message because I think, you know, students, as you are getting into your careers, you have to be flexible, and you have to be flexible with your university. And there's probably, you're making some big decisions on the rest of your life. And Diana brings up a great point that we may change and we may fail at something, but that's going to make us stronger and be able to improve and get better at maybe the next task that we take on. So I think that's a great attitude to have. So thank you for sharing that. You've had the opportunity to to experience education in both the United States and Mexico. Could you tell us a little bit about the similarities and difference between education in Mexico and the United States? And tell us about, was it difficult to begin education in the United States as a graduate student? We have many students who might consider going abroad to pursue education. So I think it's great for them to hear about what those differences are like.
Yes. So I think one of the biggest difference I already spoke a little bit about. The focus of your graduate degree is not something that you are passionate about. That's not the way you choose a career in Mexico. And that was a little bit of a shock, a cultural shock for me when I came to the US, because people will ask me like, what do you want to do? And in my head, I was like, well, whatever gets me a job, that's what I want to do. But unintentionally, I ended going the path of doing what my passion is. And I still to this day struggle with it because it's something that was really ingrained in me. And I think I shared that my husband is from India, and as people coming from what would be considered third world countries, that's very common in other countries. Thinking about something that is going to make you money, that is going to give you a comfortable life, and is going to give your family what they need, right? And that's something that has it can be frustrating when you are passionate about something that could not make you money. Although I think things have changed from when I graduated to now. I think internet and all the new opportunities out there to share your skills and your abilities online have opened the door for many, many new career paths, even in places like Mexico. But that is one of the biggest things. I know a lot of people who went to undergrad with me and ended up doing something completely different. That was actually their passion. But so here I see a lot more people going to careers in the humanities and arts, and that is not as common in Mexico and in other places in the world, from my experience, from my husband, my experience. I think that would be one of the biggest differences. Also, the level of privilege that you need to have an education in Mexico it's high. I mean, our current world situation, well, country situation in the States has shown how discrepancies and inequalities lead to different outcomes for different people. And that's something that is very similar in Mexico. Not everybody has the opportunity to have an education. And if here it is valuable to have a college degree, in a country like Mexico, it's even more. The type of jobs, it is assumed that you will have that you will need an education for an entry-level job. So the market is a little different than here. That this is something that my husband and I always often talk about, how in America you can still get a decent job without going to college, but that is not the case in other countries. And it will be very hard to have a middle life, like middle class life in other countries without a college degree. So you are kind of expected, if you are from a middle class family, you don't have a choice. You have to go to college. If your family can afford it, you will go to college, even if it's something that is not something you like. You'll just have the degree because that's what your family can afford to. If your family can afford to give it to you, you have to take it, basically. So I know, for example, a friend of my husband's who went to college with him in India for engineering, and he's now a chef. So that happens a lot, and I think here in the States it also happens, but people do take more risks here in terms of choosing a career path early on, like at the college level, that is directed to something that they're passionate about, which is not something that happens as often in other countries. But in terms of starting my education here, I think it was more challenging because I had a gap. I had a 4-year gap between my graduation and the beginning of my PhD, and so I had forgotten how to learn, like not learn, but like how to go to school, how to take notes, how to like those are skills that you don't when you start working you don't necessarily use as often. So so going to class, making assignments for classes and stuff like that, that was something I wasn't used to doing anymore, and that was the biggest challenge. In terms of language, it was, even though I was privileged enough in Mexico and my family was visionary enough to teach me English since I was around 2 years old. So I wouldn't say I grew up bilingual, but I grew up knowing English. I don't remember not knowing it. So language still was a barrier for me, especially when I was writing. When it came to writing, because that wasn't something I was focusing my understanding of English when I was in Mexico. The most important focus back then was communicating, verbal communication. So I didn't practice writing as much. So that was a challenge when I came here and I started going to school here. Yep, I think those were the biggest things, and getting used to being a student again. That was challenging.
I, I appreciate those insights, and it is really interesting to hear about the differences in ways different countries view education and look at that in the way the culture perceives them. So I think that is a great explanation about the differences between Mexico and the United States. And you know, it is funny. I think sometimes, you know, for my students who are in here right now, that you think that you just continue to learn and you continue to do that, and you do. It just looks different once you get out of high school and college. So if you ever take a break and go back, there is kind of a learning curve that happens again for you to learn those processes. So that is a great just a great answer to that question. So thank you. I appreciate it. So right now you're in the research field and you're pursuing the highest degree, which is a Doctor of Philosophy, and almost done with it too at the end of this summer, which is really exciting. But what have been your favorite aspects of pursuing this doctorate, and what are your least favorite aspects of it? Because there's always the good and the bad, right?
So my favorite aspect I kind of touched on. I love, okay, one of the things that one of the reasons I decided to continue in research was not necessarily because I wanted, was because I could not find a job opportunity as an immigrant in the US without having an advanced degree. So that's something important to know. It was a choice, but it was also a forced kind of choice because I did not have a visa that would allow me to change um, employers. So I had to continue my education in order to get a working permit so I could actually go. And since I mentioned before I like challenges, I decided why not go all the way and try to do a PhD. So the way I found my PhD area was interesting. I started my first job in Houston was focused on molecular biology. And what that means for those of you who are not familiar with this is very much basic science, learning how things work for the sake of learning how things work. So we were looking at how specific genes in the genome would affect the development of the face and the head. And so we used back then a model as a model for studying and asking those questions. We used teeth. And back then, I was young enough to think that who cares about these? I loved the research and I loved the work, but I didn't like the question that I was asking. And for me, having an engineering background, engineers are fixers. You give them a problem and they fix it and they find a solution for it somehow, right? And different types of engineering will have different tools that they use to solve different problems. But so as a basic scientist in my first job, I just didn't enjoy the question that I was asking, the questions we were asking as a lab. And so I decided that I was not going to do a PhD in molecular biology. I wanted to have bigger impact. So one of the reasons why all the people I have come across in research decide to have a career in research is because we want to have a positive impact on other people. And that has always been a big driver for me. And I wanted to benefit other people with my work, that my work had meaning. And I think as a teacher, you shared that. You have passion for benefiting others with what you do. And so I decided, okay, I need a shorter term impact because molecular biology, it benefits in the long term, right? Like the knowledge that you generate at that level, at the basic level of science, would will be used to answer bigger, larger questions, right? But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted to actually change the way people were living their lives. And so I went and decided I started looking at like, where can I apply, what topics of research, and I thought biomedical engineering was the thing. So I proceeded to try and apply to graduate school. I applied to 10 graduate schools. I did not get accepted anywhere. My first year applying, I got rejected everywhere. And what I decided was, okay, I'm not gonna give up. I'm just gonna find a job and then I'll get in some other way. Because my GRE, which is the exam, like the SATs, but for grad school, it was horrible. Honestly, it was very, very bad. And so I have good grades from college, but my GRE was poor compared to other people's, to the schools I was trying to apply for. And so I decided to get a job in biomedical engineering, in a biomedical engineering lab in Austin. And that's how I got to Austin. I came here for a job, and I was convinced that I wanted to do tissue engineering. And tissue engineering is the regeneration of tissues in the body. So it's developing technologies that help, for example, um, regenerate a whole organ, or an ear, for example, for people who have lost them, like warriors in combat who lose parts of their bodies, and to make it aesthetically pleasing, there's engineers that develop these technologies to help them. And so I was convinced that was my thing. That was what I wanted to do. You combine biology and engineering, it was it. And I got into the lab. I was working on it's something called the decellularized tissue beds. So I don't know if any of you know, but diabetic patients have wounds because of diabetes. You can get lesions in the skin, and those don't heal because one of the consequences of diabetes is that they break the capillary beds. So the little vessels that feed all the cells in your skin get broken down by the sugar in your blood. And so I was creating a technology that was going to be applied on the skin and help re-innervate, capillary, reconstruct those capillaries. And so the work was great. The question was awesome, but the environment was not. It was a very competitive environment, like everybody on their own, like trying to do their own thing. There was no collaboration, nobody supporting anybody else. Everybody was just their own one-man army. And so I did not fit there. It goes back again to knowing what you're not going to enjoy. And I sensed that early on, and I decided, okay, this is not going to be it. I'm going to do something else. And then by some luck, I think I had a friend who was doing a PhD in nutrition, and she told me, why don't you apply to nutrition? And at first I was like, oh, nutrition, please. That's like dietetics and like telling people what to eat. I am an engineer. And then I started researching and looking into what it meant to do nutrition research. And it was pretty impressive because I mean I understood biology. I've been working by then like 6 years in research, so I knew biology, but I didn't understand all the aspects of nutrition. Nutrition has an impact on the economy, on society, on politics, on basically touches every single field in existence for human understanding. Nutrition does that. And so um, remember I said I like challenges. I decided, and one of the aspects of nutrition that is it's interesting to me at least, is that it's very hard to study. When you study something, you want to isolate one single thing that will modify it, have a cause and an effect, right? So I push this and it moves, right? Something. You want to isolate the force that is causing a change. And nutrition is one of the things that you cannot isolate anything. We don't eat things by themselves. We are not existing as like an isolated thing in our environment, right? We have all aspects of weather and pollution and water, and all things affect your body and the way that the type of foods that you consume, the quality of the foods that you consume, the quantity of the foods that you consume, and the psychology behind the foods that you consume. Because diet is not only biological, it's also cultural, right? There's aspects of nutrition that come from your family of origin that you inherit, the way that you eat, the way that you encounter food, if you use it to celebrate, you use it. It's so complex that I was very drawn to it. I was like, that's the thing I want to I want to research. And so even though I had found before questions that I wanted to answer, nutrition was a thing where I felt identified. I also had struggled with being overweight all my life, so I thought maybe this is the way. And it hasn't worked out like that, guys. But I tried, and I have managed to understand a lot of aspects of myself and how I relate to food through my PhD. That's one of the coolest things. Before, when I was doing molecular biology, people would ask me, "What do you do?" And I would be like, "Well, I study teeth, blah 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 blah." And I would see like their stares, like just blank face, blank stares. People just like watching whatever was happening behind me. And now I say nutrition, and everybody's like, "Oh yes, I eat too." And I'm like, "Yeah, right." So everybody can relate to nutrition science, and it is complicated because everybody wants a simple question, simple answer, right, to how to eat. But it's way more complex than we wish it was. Because of all the things that I have shared before, like the socioeconomic aspects, cultural aspects of it, biological aspects of it. Um, it makes it very hard, very hard to concise in like one simple answer. But that's my favorite thing. The fact that I am passionate about the question, that the environment around me is a lot better than the previous ones that I tried, and that I feel like I can bring my whole self to work. I'm a girl. I I wear earrings and necklaces and makeup, and I don't feel like I'm. Nutrition is very often done by women, women scientists. So we are a high percent women field. So the majority of nutrition researchers are women. And so I feel identified. I feel like I'm understood, and I get to bring all aspects of me, my previous experience as an engineer and a scientist, and my curiosity about how I engage with food, and I can talk to my pals that are researching other aspects of nutrition about it. So it's a job that it's well-rounded for me. It's a good environment for me. I love what I'm researching, how I'm researching, the people I'm researching it with. And so it has taken a long way to get here, but it hasn't worked. So I love that. It is one of the hard aspects of it is that it's still research. And it is still, even though we are a high percent women environment, I'm double minority. I'm a woman and I am Hispanic. So being a minority is still hard, and there's bias that we have to encounter all the time. But I have been supported by people, and I have, whenever somebody has put their hand out there for me for help, I've taken it. I have not even well, honestly, I have wondered, like, maybe they're just doing it because I am brown or something like that. But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if it's going to take me to where I want to go, I'll use whatever it's in my disposal. So at my disposal, right? Um, so that's the hard part. Being in science, feeling in a certain way that you don't belong because you are brown and this is not expected of you, it's hard because there's little things in our head that are like, oh, you don't know anything, you don't know what you're doing, like, come look where you're coming from, like these people have, like, all those negative aspects of it that you'll encounter anywhere, right? In science, they are, I think they are just bigger than because it's a field that thrives on being the best at every single level. So it is competitive. It is challenging all the time, and you have to confront those monsters head on. Like, I think that other career paths allow you to just ignore those things, but science, because of its nature, makes you question everything around you and yourself all the time. So that has been the hardest part, but it's been a good learning experience for me, and I think it would be good for the rest of my career. It will help me get as far as I can get. So yeah, long answer.
Great answer. And I appreciate your thoughts about the passion that you bring to your work, and just, every day you go to work, you're really a superhero. You are standing up for all the Latinas and all the females who are interested in going into research, because sometimes and even looking at it historically, we think of it as sort of the white guy who researched everything, and that's what history shows. And you are breaking down those barriers, and we really appreciate your hard work doing that. So I think that's really awesome. So final question here before I open it up to the group. One of the things you're researching, of course, is the microbiome and how that affects our nutrition and our bodies. But what are the benefits to keeping that gut healthy? A lot of times in the news we hear, don't take too many antibiotics, or just eat yogurt and you'll be okay. And how can high school students help gut healthy?
No, that's the hardest question. I could talk like, but I think in short answer, there's a lot of potential in our microbiome. Just so you have an idea, we have around 10,000 different species of bacteria inside our bodies, right? And we are just one species outside holding it in. Our whole genome does not compare to the potential in the genome of those 10,000 different organisms. So we have co-evolved to depend on them for many different aspects of nutrition and health. We depend on them for generation of a wide range of molecules that impact and signal our intestines, and not only our intestines, the signals from the gut microbiota get to our brains, to our heart, our livers. They are basically part, in my field, we call it the meta organism. So the humans are a meta organism, beyond organism, right? We are a small ecosystem. And the way that I like to talk about the microbiome in classes I give at UT is that the microbiome is like a garden, and you have to fertilize your garden, prune your garden, prune, like when you take your weeds out, you prune, right? Okay, so that and take care of the garden, so the garden is healthy, right? So that is the same way that we should treat our own ecosystem. We are a small jungle, right? A small ecosystem that is biodiverse, and its balance it equals health. So the things that we know with the current research, the field of microbiome research has around 10 years. So it's a baby research field, and there's a lot of things we don't know. But what you can assume is that the microbiome impacts everything from your brain health and mental health to your bone health and cardiovascular health, and the response you have to diet and medications even mediate how we respond to certain drug treatments. Like you can cluster patients that respond to cancer therapeutic by their microbiome, and you can define who will respond positively to the drug treatment and who respond negatively just by how their microbiome is composed. So that is how powerful it is. And so there's going to be a lot of potential benefits of understanding what the microbiome and how the microbiome does what it does. So what I can tell you from what we know is that yes, excessive exposure to antibiotics is negative for the microbiome. It will wipe out specific species in your microbiome and alter the dynamic that it has, and in consequence, the response and the effects that it has on our bodies. So minimizing antibiotic treatment, and I think that nowadays antibiotics are not as used as I think it has. That knowledge has reached the medical clinicians, and now they're not offering antibiotics as easy as they used to before. So minimizing antibiotic treatment, then the microbiome thrives on fiber. That is basically the thing that they munch on and what they use to generate all these good beneficial chemicals that they produce. So vegetables, eating vegetables. You are not going to find anything better than eating vegetables, not overcooked, just not necessarily raw, just vegetables. As long as most Americans don't eat enough vegetables and enough fiber in their diet, so just increasing your consumption of vegetables. One trick that I have is just putting vegetables in every single dish that you cook. For you high school students, I think getting involved in cooking, learning how to cook your own food, I think you will see a long-lived benefit for the rest of your life. Like learning how to cook is a very important skill just for survival. So you're not eating ramen noodles when you leave your house. That's important. And I think not falling prey of those technologies or products that promise to just revolutionarily change your microbiome and your health. That is not scientifically supported. You will just dump your money in the drain. And even, I don't know if any of you is familiar with tests, but there's kits that will tell you how your microbiome is, but that's it. Like there's no real insight that is coming from that. So the test cost around $150. I would say go to groceries and buy the whole month of vegetable supply for your house. So it's not worth doing that. And there are actually big research based. I know that the scientists that are doing these type of projects are citizen-driven projects where you send your sample out to a lab to get analyzed and see how your microbiome compares to the whole cohort that they have, the whole group of people that have previously participated in those. So those would actually benefit the field by giving us a wider set of people to look at, and you will actually like benefit somebody other than just you having a bunch of weird pictures that you're not going to understand on your email. There's not really a consensus of how it works or what a healthy microbiome is yet, because it depends a lot on your genetics, on your environment, your diet. And it's a very dynamic and changing thing. It literally changes from hour to hour, from like before and after a meal, it will change a little bit. So it's not black or white. Eat your vegetables. Don't take antibiotics if you don't need it. And yeah, that's basically the gist of what I know up until now.
That is a great explanation. And I love how the metaphor you use to describe it as a garden, and it really is. And it's amazing to think that, if I'm correct, aren't there more bacteria in our bodies than there are cells in our bodies? Do I have that correct?
That's a very, so it was a calculation that was miscalculated, but
Oh, darn it. All right.
like the message, right? Like I think I've seen people, experts still using it, but it has been a little bit debunked. But there's still a large, in terms of genes, it is. We have a bigger array of genes in the microbiome than in our own cells. So it is true to a certain extent.
That is awesome. That's really amazing to think that we are just kind of cultivating something new all the time, and we are kind of an ecosystem. And students just thinking about those vegetables. You always want to make sure that you are shopping around the periphery of that grocery store, because that's where your vegetables and good, hearty, nutritional foods are that are going to support that gut microbiome. And the other thing I wanted to point out too that you mentioned is that you are studying a breakthrough area that nobody thought about studying a few years ago. And that's amazing, because some of you might be pursuing a new passion or a new degree or research area that hasn't even been thought of yet. So always remember that there's so many questions out there, and there's so many different breakthroughs that are happening all the time. And one day you may be that person developing that new field. So always keep that passion. I really appreciate it. So thank you for the explanation. I'm going to minimize my window in just a second, but audience, what questions do you have? And I'm going to go ahead and pull up the chat box and give you a minute or two to go ahead and prompt those questions.
Anything, even if it's not about research.
We'll give everybody a minute or two here.
And that's one of the things that I always do. I just ask, because I know a lot of smart people, and a lot of smart people just think like, oh, I don't know, and are ashamed of asking a question. I always think about it that if I ask it, then at least 50% of the people here have that same question. Always assume that the fact that you are curious about something will help somebody else learn something new.
I like that. And I think the important thing to remember is that we have a growth mindset, right? So we're always looking at ways to grow and be open-minded to new perspectives and ideas. So I think that's a good way to look at it. So we have a question here. So Edlemi said that there's a, that you're considering studying biomedical engineering, and do you have any advice for a high school student who might be considering that?
Yeah, I do, which is going to be a little weird and probably, sorry, not something you expect. But I suggest, this is something I wish somebody would have told me, is that the best and coolest work is happening at the intersection of different areas of understanding, of human understanding. And the one that is growing the most right now in biology is called the bioinformatics. So computer science and biology are marrying together and having a huge impact on how science is moving forward. So one of the most important things to grow in that field is learning how to code. And it applies to this field and any other field, because computers are something that we're using as tools in all fields of not only scientific knowledge, but like just work. So learning how to code would really, really give you a heads up to what will be coming. If you're interested in research, that will be something that you will potentially be using. And if you are not using it right on, as you start your degree, it will eventually be used in research if you want to dip your toe in the research lake. So coding is something that I would be doing.
That's mind blowing to me. I never would have guessed that. That's really interesting. And Lemmy, there's over at UT, there is a whole bioinformatics research division that looks into these types of questions and the intersection between how we can use high technology computing to help us solve a lot of our scientific problems. So that is great advice.
One of the shocking things that when I talk to people about this is that the advances in the fight against the pandemic have been done in the majority from people like me working from their houses on maybe there will be one person in the lab running the actual experiments in the lab, but then you need a whole army of people digging through the data that is coming out of those experiments and understanding what is going on in the background. So we are turning biology into information, and in order to understand that information, you need to be able to communicate with the computers, and coding is the way that you do it. And if you are curious about what language, I would start with Python. That is the one with the biggest applications. Like from any field, you will find something in Python. So that would be something I wish I knew, because it was a hard thing to learn for me when I was in my PhD at, how old am I? Like 30 years old, 33 years old. I had to learn. And even though I was an engineer and I learned some of it in undergrad, it was very basic. And so I wish I had been told ahead of time. And this goes for anybody, even if you're not trying to go into the biomedical research field. I think it's a good skill to have.
That is awesome. And there's so many resources out there to learn some of these basic languages. Google has stuff, Microsoft has stuff, and there's so many free packages out there to start to teach you those basics. And go into it knowing that you may be learning one language, but it may be different in the years to come, but you're learning the foundations of how to program, which is the most important. So that is awesome advice. Are there any other questions out there before we do our wrap up?
I just want to open to say, if you have any other questions, you can. Sometimes we're shy to, or we can think on the spot, and then like a half an hour later, are like, oh, I should have asked that thing. You can reach me on email. I can write it in the message box, right?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, please do. Yeah, drop your email in there, and that's a way for you all to reach out. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. That's perfect. So, if you all are on, make sure you do copy and paste that if you have some questions later on, and even just write it down, scribble it. That way you can always come back to that if something does pop up in the next few days. So, but as we kind of wrap up for today, do want to just plug a few things before we say thank you. But all of these videos as we go through are going to be posted on the Workforce Solutions Capital Area YouTube page. And we've got some more speakers coming up over the next few weeks. Next couple weeks, we've got our next one's going to be on Thursday, and we'll be hearing from Dr. Hernandez, who is a doctor of nurse practitioning, and she is a she is a nursing professor with Texas Tech, as well as having experience in the neonatal intensive care unit, taking care of little babies with the Ascension Seton hospital system. So it'll be really awesome to hear from her. Before we leave, I wanted to thank our guest speaker for all of her thoughts today, and helping us kind of drive and think about that passion and how we can be the change agent to discover the next big breakthrough in science and engineering. So I hope you all definitely consider all those words of wisdom. And we do appreciate all of your expertise, Deanna. And we're so excited that you were able to share your experiences in Mexico and the United States, and all your research ideas as well. So thank you so much. We definitely appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun, and I hope you guys got something good out of this. Out of listening to me talk for an hour. And please reach out to me and let me know if you have any questions about anything. Just how to get into college, how to start a career, how to get some experience in college, in research, all of those things. You can just shoot me an email, and if I don't have an answer, I'll direct you to somebody that knows how to answer the question.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, everybody, you all have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you on Thursday to talk a little bit about nursing. Take care. Bye.